We are at 23 participants and at 2 minutes past the bottom of the hour, so I think we should go ahead and get started. I know you all are busy and have lots of things going on. Thank you all for joining our monthly Alaska Hydrogen Energy Working Group meeting. We are happy to have you all here. We always start with introductions of anyone who's new to the group. If you are new, if this is your first meeting, or if you've lurked at previous meetings and you haven't introduced yourself, please introduce yourself. It's a friendly crew. Everyone's here to learn and further their knowledge. So we'd love to hear from you if you're joining us for the first time today. Any new faces? Anyone brave enough to introduce themselves?
I am going to be speaking later, so I feel like it would be silly to introduce myself now, but I am new to the group and I look forward to it.
Terrific. Thank you, Todd from ZeroAvia. We're really looking forward to your presentation on innovative flight approaches. Anyone else who's new to the group today who would like to introduce themselves? Just going to let the silence hang for a minute. Okay, well, either there's nobody new or nobody wants to speak up, and that is fine. It's a quiet crew today. All right, well, we will next launch into any updates that are hydrogen related. We've typically gone through our subcommittee groups, but this is also a chance to bring up any hydrogen related sort of projects or outstanding items. We try to keep this fairly business related, and then we will move into our feature presentation for today. So starting with our subcommittees, I believe the first one is the Alaska-Iceland collaboration. I don't think there are any updates here, but one thing I will add is that the Arctic Energy Office is sponsoring its first Arctic Embassy Science Fellow. And Aaron Cook from CCHRC, now known as NREL North or the NREL Alaska campus, is leaving in another week or two to spend a 2-month fellowship in Iceland, where he will be looking at a range of different energy technologies and thinking about the differences and similarities and applications between and across Iceland and Alaska. So that's not necessarily hydrogen specific, but I know hydrogen is one of the topics that he will be thinking about when he's there. Does anyone else have anything to add in the Iceland-Alaska arena since we're on the topic? Nothing else there. Okay, great. The next one is the Alaska State Roadmap for Hydrogen. That is the effort that I have been shepherding, and I do not have a draft roadmap ready. I have been a bit delinquent, or rather just buried in other things. I am working on it. I do hope to have a draft out soon. I do appreciate everyone's input, and I apologize for the delay, but there are just not enough hours in the day, and unfortunately, I do need to sleep. So if that weren't a requirement, maybe I'd have it done by now. So nothing there. The other topic that we've frequently kept alive here in discussion is the Arctic Road Rally, hydrogen fuel charging stations. Tim, I know you updated us last time that that has been postponed until the following year, and I don't believe there are any updates, but if there's anything you want to say in that vein, this is your chance.
Nothing on the Arctic Road Rally or EV tech demonstrations front, except for maybe I'm going to shoehorn this into that topic. Following the viewing of a recorded session of one of our working group sessions, Jessie Huff from USDA reached out to make an introduction to one of those companies that she thought might be a good fit there. So I would just re-up that ask to anyone listening, if there is a company that you know of who might have some sort of hydrogen fuel cell EV charging that is in need of demonstration or tech validation. There are 2 options or opportunities here. One of those is squarely to this agenda point for EV tech demonstrations that we could build around some of that equipment. And then the other one, very similarly, is an opportunity to go through our Tech Deployment Track program. That's Launch Alaska's Tech Deployment Track program. The application period is open until May 15th, so give or take about 2 weeks from now. And I'll just drop the link into the chat there. But certainly let me know if there are companies, and this doesn't necessarily just have to be hydrogen. So if you think of, sorry, I'm straying beyond the boundary of the working group, but if there are companies who bring innovation into the energy, transportation, or industry sectors, then please let us know if there's a good fit or flag the company for me, and I can do some follow-up. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim.
Tim, do you mind if I chime in real fast? Is it possible to send me an email with information that you would be looking for? I spoke with GenCell, which has a hydrogen fuel cell to EV charger, about helping support that effort, and they said that they would be happy to. I just got back from meeting with the Tabunga Foundation, the Native Alaskan tribe, about also supporting them with one of these hydrogen fuel cells. So it's a toss-up between where we put it. So if you'd like, we'd be happy to help do that, as well as we have another technology out of Canada that does ethanol to green energy, to green hydrogen, that can utilize hydrogen on demand for hydrogen electric vehicles. And then when they're not using the hydrogen, you could go into a hydrogen fuel cell to power battery electric vehicles. So I can send both of those. They both have agreed to do stuff in Alaska.
That's great news, and happy to do some follow-up. I just dropped my email in the chat there, so if you want to just send me an email, and I'll do some follow-up by email as well. Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific. We love it when connections get made here and then followed up on later. The other thread we've kept alive is methanol engines. I know that's sort of a long saga. I don't necessarily expect there's any updates there, but since we have it on our agenda, I'll open the floor for any comments from JR or any of his colleagues, or anyone else for that matter. Maybe even Michael might have something to say on that. Any updates there?
No real updates, kind of same as where we were before. One other thing we're also looking at is, on my end, is potentially looking at some end users that have coal-fired steam turbines, and how it might work to integrate, a hydrogen carrier fuel for a system like that. So that's really the only update I have.
Okay, so integrating hydrogen in place of
whether that be methanol or ammonia.
Okay.
It seems like that would be kind of low-hanging fruit, as opposed, for one aspect. If we're going to look at it as far as power generation goes, obviously having it methanol or ammonia as a fuel for liquid fueled turbines or reciprocating engines, that's one aspect. But then another aspect might be looking at steam plants that are generating with coal right now. That might be another easy way to get systems in place to utilize these hydrogen carrier fuels for power generation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions from Mike? Okay. Are there any other technical announcements or asks or questions or updates for the group? Okay. All right, hearing none. Before we jump into our presentation today, I just want to highlight a couple announcements or events related to this group that are coming up, and then we'll announce them again at the end of the session today. I just want to make sure that people hear them. So our next working group meeting, regular working group meeting, will be Tuesday, June 6th, and Patty will be sending invitations out about that. And the speaker that we have tentatively confirmed for that meeting will be Dr. Evan Gray from Griffith University in Australia, where they are actually, building and operating hydrogen facilities there. So I'm really excited about that, and I'm excited to hear about projects that are sort of underway, and he'll give us a lowdown about some of that progress as well as those challenges. It's a different environment for sure than Alaska, but also similar in the sense that there are microgrids. So I hope you'll all tune in for that. Again, that'll be on Tuesday, June 6th at the same time. But before that, we had talked about having an in-person social hour on Monday, May 22nd, just before the kickoff of the Alaska Sustainable Energy Conference. And Patty has been chasing down all sorts of leads, and it looks like we will be able to do this. We'll do it late in the afternoon on Monday, the 22nd in Anchorage, most likely at the Atwood building, which is just adjacent to the Denina Center, where the Sustainable Energy Conference will be held. Big thanks to John Espandola and folks in the governor's office for helping us out with some of these locations. We're really grateful. We'll send out details about that, but it'll be around 3:30 or 4. We'll have some munchies and some drinks, non-alcoholic drinks, because we can't have alcohol in those spaces, but folks can then go to the reception immediately afterwards for the Sustainable Energy Conference and continue the fun. So I'm hoping that folks can join us in person. It'll be primarily social unless we come up with some big agenda items. I'm working on perhaps maybe a show and tell, of a hydrogen related technology at the event, and hope to have more details about that soon. Patty, do you have anything to add to either of those meeting announcements?
Yeah, thank you, Erin. And again, huge thanks to Mr. Espandola and your whole office and team there. We appreciate the help setting this up, and a first in-person event. We're looking forward to it. So I did put a link to an RSVP form, super brief, just name if you'd like to attend, any other questions, or feel free to just email me if that's too much to do. But yeah, we're trying to gauge numbers, and I think you covered all the main details. I'll email this RSVP and the information out via email, but feel free to fill it out now while you're thinking about it if you'd like. Thanks.
Terrific. Thank you, Patty. Any questions? Any other announcements that come to mind? Okay. All right then, Patty, I don't think we have any other updates then before we launch into our presentation. Is that correct? Okay, thumbs up. All right, then we have Todd Solomon from ZeroAvia, really excited about this presentation about flight options. And Todd, we're going to give the floor to you to share your slides. Please also give us a little introduction to yourself and your background and how you ended up on this path. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I'm really excited to talk about this stuff. Sorry, I have a couple dogs in the back that have been silent all day.
Where are you speaking to us?
I'm sorry, I'm in DC, and it's
okay.
So it's 3:45 here. When I say all day, I really do mean all day. Anyway, I came to ZeroAvia a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, from a long career at US DOT, also in DC. And I worked in the office of the secretary in various positions. I started out in the public affairs shop where I did comms for Secretary LaHood. Well, I didn't start out there, but that was sort of my peak period at DOT was in the first Obama administration. And so we worked on distracted driving. We worked on bike infrastructure and a variety of issues. Toward the end of my DOT career, I was working in the infrastructure financing office. So it's called the Build America Bureau, but they run a program called TIFIA, which is a surface transportation infrastructure financing program. And one of the things I worked on was trying to get airports access to the TIFIA program for terminal side projects. So there was like a loophole in the TIFIA Authorization Act, and we had airports that were interested in doing financing terminal projects. So I went from sort of a multimodal focus to more specific aviation focus. But I don't know, there was this other administration that came in 2016, and things got kind of dark in government, and everybody around me started laying really low and not wanting to innovate. And I'm of a certain age, and I felt like I had one more good job in me, and I wanted to do something, and I wanted to go out doing something and not just sort of watching a calendar like I was seeing other people do. And I'm not I am not a Fed basher. You know, I worked with a lot of really good, highly motivated people in government, and they just had their spirits sucked out of them, and it became a depressing place to be. So happened to stumble across this company, ZeroAvia, which I am really happy to talk to you about today. And yeah, I've been working really hard for the last year, much harder than I was before. And I've never felt younger, professionally younger than I do today. So I'm really happy about that. And I've learned a lot of new skills. I was not, I had done some government affairs work with DOT, but not nearly as much as I'm doing now with ZeroAvia. And you know, as you know from what you guys have been doing in Alaska, hydrogen is not something people know about. It's certainly not something people are comfortable with. And FAA and Congress and even DOE, even though there's a hydrogen fuel cell technology office there, we've had a lot of work to do and a lot of educating to do. But it's been really fun because I'm just lucky enough to be with this company that has a good story to tell. So I will tell it to you now. And do you guys typically do questions after, or are you going to interrupt me on the way, which is fine. I'm not really good at seeing hands raised in Zoom. So just, you know.
Your preference. If you'd like me to talk or pause you if there's a question that comes up in the chat.
If you want to interrupt me with a hand, that's cool. That'd be awesome. Like tell me if there's a hand up. Yeah, great. Okay. All right. So ZeroAvia is a company that's been around. We started in late 2017, really started in earnest in 2018. It started as a passion project. Our founder was active in the EV charging station space. He had a startup that he sold in 2017. He had a fairly large network of charging stations in California at the time. And he's a general aviation pilot. And so he had converted his car to electric. And then he decided to convert his plane to electric. And then he realized maybe there was something in this as a startup. And that's where we began. So we sort of start with two problems. Our founder started with one problem, which was environment. We have since sort of talked about another problem that that we think we can help solve. So one of the problems is that aviation, which is a pretty small contributor to climate change right now, at least in terms of carbon, maybe 2 to 3%, you know, depending on what study you're reading in terms of carbon. But as electric vehicles take over the fossil fuel vehicles, at least in the lower 48, and around the globe. The aviation's contribution is going to continue to grow because other industries are abating. Aviation is one of those hard to abate industries. Plus, air traffic is expected to grow. So in the end, we think that the contribution of aviation to climate change is going to be far more significant than it is today. I personally think we should take it on anyway. I don't, if it's 3%, it's 3%, but that 3% can be reduced. So why not go that rate? Another issue that we have is that 2/3 of the impact of aviation on climate might not be coming from carbon. So it's unclear, but NOx and other particulates that are coming out of the back of the airplane may also be climate impacting. And if they're not climate impacting, we know that they are air quality impacting. So if you're in a community that is around an airport, your air quality is impacted by the stuff coming out the back end of an aircraft. I saw this study of LAX. So the cool thing about LAX is that the wind is always blowing in one direction. So you can do a study of asthma impact and see that it's directly correlated with the flight path in and out of LAX, and it's really discomforting to see. But the other issue, so I said there are two problems. The second problem is that air service has again been reduced to isolated communities. So at least in the lower 48, one of the impacts of COVID was just a slaughter of sub-regional airports. I know that air service is essential in Alaska, so I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I haven't looked at the data to see the actual flight volumes, but I suspect that it's so important that the COVID impact on travel is not the same as the need for getting food and medical supplies and whatnot in and out of communities up there. But I'm happy to be corrected on that.
For the sales annex, for sure, to address the annexes that you were dealing with, and on the 3D.
I just muted him. Keep going.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a question. All right, cool. So that's another of the issues. We didn't start with hydrogen. We started with battery because as I said, our founder came from the EV space. He first started looking at battery electric aircraft, and of course quickly came to the conclusion that batteries were too big, too heavy, and they need to be replaced all the time. Not all the time, but frequently, and they're expensive. They're also, at least currently, not made of the best material. So he started looking around at other things. Of course, there's sustainable aviation fuels. There's a lot of research funding been distributed for sustainable aviation fuels, and then you have PTL fuels, syn fuels or e-fuels, however you call them, where hydrogen is used as part of the process. The problem with those fuels and with hydrogen combustion is that you're still burning something, and so you're still going to have those non-carbon emissions. Although there's going to be some reduction, I know with hydrogen, for example. The data is not out, just to be clear, the data is not nearly final on what the impact of those non-carbon emissions is. So even the guy that we cite as our reference in that previous slide about non-carbon emissions has said we really need to look at this further. I sat through a presentation from an FAA scientist who was trying to convince us that actually that those gases were actually they were temperature decreasing instead of increasing. In the end, we arrived at the idea that a hydrogen powered electric motor, so hydrogen fuel cell motor would be the way to go. So that's our solution. There are many people in the company who showed a slide like this and call it the solution. I'm trying to be a little more open-minded these days. But one of the solutions we propose is a hydrogen electric engine in every aircraft. It's a super ambitious idea, but I think if you're going to have a mission statement, you might as well go whole hog. There are companies also working in the hydrogen space like Airbus, GE, Rolls, large companies who will say that if you're going to use hydrogen to power flight and something large like transoceanic flight, that it's going to have to be combustion. So we're looking, there's really a plethora of ideas now circulating in the space. And in fact, one of the things we've been talking with Airbus about is a model where we use hydrogen combustion to get these A380s off the ground, and then use a fuel cell to power the sort of glide flight, right? The cruising altitude flight. You guys are all in this hydrogen working group. I don't know how much tech explaining I want to do here. You might know more than I do. But essentially what we have is a model where we have hydrogen in the sort of, in this case, shown on the wing. It goes into a fuel cell. At the same time, we have oxygen coming into the fuel cell. We have that catalyzed with a proton exchange membrane, so that in order to bond with the oxygen, the electrons from hydrogen have to go around a circuit where we can a course where we can capture them into our electric motor. And in between the fuel cell and the electric motor, there's actually a DC to AC inverter. And I only mention it because it in the end, it's become quite important to our power electronics. So that's on the left side of the screen. The beauty of this is, of course, that the only emissions would be water vapor. There are lots of people who think that water vapor is itself cloud forming emission, and then likely to trap heat with those clouds at a certain altitude. We're working on two things. One, we're working on research projects to try and figure out if indeed the contrails of water vapor are going to be an issue at altitude, and B, to see if we can't figure out some way of capturing the water vapor and keeping it on board the plane, or offing it at lower altitudes where it can't do any harm. But the cool thing is that all the climate stuff aside, we are looking at operating costs that are significantly lower in flight. And so this is where we saw that we helped solve that second problem of reduced service. So in places where the economics make a route seem marginal or unprofitable, we think we can lower the costs of the operating costs by 25 to 40% per flight. And that might be enough to increase service to some places, to introduce service at places that are completely isolated by air. This is a little visual timeline of the things that we've done. So the very first thing we did was to spin up on top of this El Camino on the left, a first electric motor, and that powered the Piper that you see in 2019, which was electric. And then in 2020, we took the battery electric Piper from 2019 and made it hydrogen fuel cell. In 2021, we mounted the motor in 2020 was about 250 kilowatts. So we then scaled up in 21 to a 600 kilowatt motor, and that was a little heavier. We had to mount it on a legit truck that we call the Hypertruck. And of course, by now, if you spent any time in hydrogen in the last year, everything has to begin with HY, no matter what it does. So you'll see a number of our technologies might have that flaw as well. In 2022, we started transplanting this 600 kilowatt motor into a Dornier 228. It's a twin turboprop airplane, so we can use a conventional engine on one side for redundancy and safety, and then test it out on the right side with our powertrain. In January, late January this year, we flew that thing for the first time. We are flying it. We're now flying it about weekly, right? Tweaking it, flying it, getting the data back, seeing what we're learning. But and the goal here is that by the end of the year, we'll have a setup that we think is going to take us into certification and the launch craft for this. So we'll start the cert process with the authorities in 24. Our launch aircraft is going to be a Cessna Caravan, which is quite relevant for the Alaskan market, as it turns out. Having looked at a number of the caravan activity around the country, Alaska stands out pretty nicely as a target market for us. Hence our joining Launch Alaska in the tech deployment track this year, which was a really good experience. And I think increased our interest in the market, if nothing else. I think we learned a lot about the state, but we also learned that there really is a good target market for us here. Another big development we had this year was we at one point last year acquired a fuel cell company that we had been partnered with before. And they are working on high temp proton exchange membranes. So the fuel cell in our existing Dornier aircraft uses a low LT-PEM, a low temperature PEM system. But the beauty of the high temp system is that I don't quite understand why this is, but because it operates at a higher temperature, you actually have to cool it less. And so eliminating the cooling system takes a huge amount of weight out of off the whole rig and increases our power density. So power over mass. And it then allows us, we think it really unlocks the next aircraft that we're going to try. So we've been, as I said, we flew this Dornier with a 600 kilowatt motor. But at the same time, we haven't stopped in a bit like we have. So we have the group that's integrating that motor into the Dornier and then eventually the Cessna. But the folks who designed that motor have been working on the next iteration. And that group is based in Everett, Washington, north of Seattle at Payne Field. And just yesterday, I was there, and we were unveiling a partnership with Alaska Airlines No relation. Well, some relation, but I believe they're Seattle based. Anyway, we got from them a Dash 8 Q400. And you can see it's nicely tricked out. It looks really nice, but the next step is to put a 1.8 megawatt engine motor into one of those nacelles. So it's another twin turboprop. It's much larger. So this one was a 76-seater. And in addition to unveiling the aircraft yesterday, we demonstrated. So again, you see the Hypertruck on the right side of the screen. This time, instead of the 600 kilowatt, it's got a 1.8 megawatt on it. It has it's spinning the same prop that is on the Dash 8 in the other side of the screen, and we're using the same gearbox that's on the Dash 8. So we're really trying to mimic exactly what would happen in the air, right? We ran it yesterday on batteries, to be full disclosure, but the truck is ready with fuel cells. It has tanks of hydrogen on board. We just didn't have time to test it in time for yesterday's event. Yeah, it was pretty cool because, yes, we had an aircraft that's been flying, and it's great to see the photos of the aircraft in flight. But yeah, it's a 19-seater, and it's really hard to get folks to believe in something, especially outside of a state like Alaska, where there are a lot of small aircraft, making really important missions. The rest of the country, I think, doesn't necessarily see it that way. Hawaii is another example where those aircraft are quite busy as well. So it was great to see it in to see this large aircraft. And I think when people talk about commercial aviation, no offense to the Dorniers and the Cessnas of the world, but I think they think of something larger. And of course they think of jets as well. And we can talk about that next. I'm sorry, you had a question?
Oh, sure. There's a hand up. So go
Awesome.
ahead, Nicholas.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about your fuel cells. You keep discussing the fuel cells. Are they solid state? Is that how they work? Are you doing some sort of bonding material that keeps the hydrogen in place, or like what is it? High pressure storage? Just could you walk us through that a little bit?
I could not. I cannot, but I can get that answer for you.
Yeah, I was just wondering because when we talk about engines and we talk about fuel and we talk about weight, and with hydrogen there's a lot of different options. So I was just kind of figuring out how you guys solve that particular problem of the weight.
My guess is they are not solid state, but I'll come back with I'll email around the response to that. So this is where we're going. We're hoping to be in the air in commercial service in 25 with the smaller motor. We're hoping to be test flying the Dash 8 sometime next year. We took a little informal pool among ZeroAvians yesterday at the event, and I think the consensus is October would be a reasonable target to see that thing in flight. So that's the ZA 2000. The beauty of that system is that we think we can fly regional jets with that same powertrain. Obviously, there's going to need to be some tweaking done to it, but and so that will really unlock. There are. The reason Alaska was able to give us the Dash 8 is because they're discontinuing the use of it. But there are a lot of ATR 72s out there flying commercially. A lot of them are being used for cargo. And FedEx is one of our sort of target launch customers. And they also fly a lot of caravans. But the CR700, CRJ 700, and the Embraer 175 are real workhorses in regional air travel. and we really have our sights set on that before the end of the decade. We are actively working with Airbus. We haven't made any formal announcements on that. We are beginning to work with Boeing. When we get to those aircraft, we're not going to be able to retrofit them. So the way we're taking a Dash 8 and putting our powertrains on them is probably not going to work with the narrow body single aisle jets. So we're going to have to, they're going to be line fit. So they'll come out of Boeing with that kit on board. Because of that, we're going to have to work much closer with the OEMs when we get to that sort of level. But we really do believe that between the HTPEM and the motor system we have, so the motor system is kind of cool. We have this relatively small electric motor, and we can string them in line on the same shaft. We can string 4. So the way we can scale up is really just by adding another motor to the sequence. So the 1.8 is a set of 2 900 kilowatt motors, and then the Dash 8 will end up with 3 of those probably on each wing, and then the CRJs will end up with 4 on each engine. So that's how it's going to work. So it's kind of a modular system. We can go to up to about 5 megawatts with it. We're not alone. So I don't, I love talking about ZeroAvia, but I will tell you this: we flew our 19-seater in January, but our primary competitors, Universal Hydrogen, flew a Q300, Dash 8 Q300 in March of this year. So they right now are the largest of, they have flown the largest hydrogen aircraft. I don't know if y'all know Joby, that it's an eVTOL startup, and they bought themselves a hydrogen aviation company last year, or 21. And then, as I said, Airbus and Rolls have been working on this stuff. GE has partnered with Safran to work on this stuff. So there is a sort of nascent industry going on there. This, we all have the same goal, and we're working more or less cooperatively, I would say. Perhaps getting to what might be more interesting for you guys is a question of, or at least more sort of hydrogen in Alaska related, is what are we going to do with, what are we going to do to get hydrogen to the airports, right? It's one thing to build hydrogen electric aircraft, but if there's no hydrogen at the airports, they're gonna look awfully pretty and sit awfully still. So I say we have 2.5 approaches. There are 2 approaches, right? You can have hydrogen produced at the airport. You can have it electrolyzed at the airport on site, or you can truck it in, right, or pipe it in. And each airport is going to have a different use case, I think. And then the sort of 2.5 part is that, if you have a grid that can sustain it, you can plug into the grid, and you can electrolyze based on whatever kind of power you have coming out of the outlet, right, or coming off the grid. If you want true zero emission flight, you're going to want to be able to buy some sort of renewable energy electricity, right? And then the other option, this sort of half option, is, install some sort of renewable array that the airport owns and operates on campus with the airport. There are some airports, airports in Arizona where they're going to have sun, 300 days a year, where that might make more sense than in other airports, right? So those are the 2.5 models that we talk about, or Model 1, Model 2A, and Model 2B. We have already started working with airports around the world, most closely with Edmonton. Edmonton Airport is pretty innovative, I have to say, and you know, the flights going out of Edmonton, a lot of them are going to communities similar to those in Alaska, where the only route in and out, at least in the winter, for some of those communities is by air. They don't even have the benefit really of the water access. Yeah, there are still challenges. There are challenges that we've solved and challenges that we haven't solved. Energy density of the larger aircraft. Energy, you know, getting the right energy density to fly those aircraft is not easy. The universal hydrogen flight, although it was on a Dash 8 Q300, it was really the hydrogen electric engine they used was really underpowered. They used a 600 kilowatt, 650 kilowatt motor. You could not certify, you know, the FAA is not going to certify that technology. But we think that the our high temp fuel cells will help. Onboard liquid hydrogen storage, definitely a problem. I think it's probably the hardest solve that we have, because hydrogen takes, you know, hydrogen's awesome. As y'all probably know, it's got great gravimetric energy density and just really not so good volumetric energy density. So it takes up a lot of space. That's an issue for economics of a route, right? Safety is an issue. Hydrogen on board, the hydrogen, especially if it's liquid hydrogen, you're going to have fugitive hydrogen control issues. So we have all these material choices to make. We have design alternatives to sort of figure out. And then for us, the regulatory environment has been a bit of a challenge. It's my personal challenge, so I'm a little more intimate with that. The FAA has been super cooperative. They have every intention of not holding us up in our path to commercialization, but they don't really control their own destiny. You know, they're under-resourced, right? They shot themselves in the foot with the Boeing Max problem, so they're really under a lot of scrutiny. They lost a lot of bodies at the time. Between COVID and the Max, there was a lot of exodus from the FAA. So timely certification is really is going to be something that's hard to deal with. Or hard to, we're gonna have to push really hard to make it happen. But our relationship is good, and as I said, they have every intention of helping out. We're gonna need standards, right, for processes that haven't yet happened. There are a lot of people who are working on that. I'm not too concerned about getting those standards in place. There's a project with NREL and the FAA to work on airport standards needs. The FAA certification office is looking into how fuel cells work. So that's cool, especially the high temp fuel cells. So they got their hands on a high temp fuel cell, so they can sort of learn about it as we sort of develop our tech. Who's going to pay for the infrastructure? You know, typically airports have to have customers they have to satisfy. And so airports end up paying for a lot of stuff. There are airport funding programs. Some of the airport funding programs don't allow spending on fuel farms. And so it's unclear whether hydrogen storage would count as a fuel farm. Airports don't tend to produce their own energy, although there are now a fair number of airports that have solar installations and are working on microgrids. R&D funding has been tough. As I said, there's been a lot of funding for sustainable aviation fuels, and not so much all the other funding that goes into sustainability is really about lightening the aircraft with composite materials, or making routes more efficient, right? The air traffic control routes more efficient. So they're really sort of tweaking at the edges. The SAFs, it's going to be tough. SAFs are drop-in up to 50%. We don't really know what's going to happen after that. And so that's going to, it's going to have its own limits. And then there's no, these aircraft last for decades. So, and the engines last a decade. So there's no incentive for an operator to stop the aircraft, drop the engine, and buy a new hydrogen electric powertrain for it. And then at the airport, access to renewable energy if you want to produce on premises, or access to power purchase agreements if you want to produce on premises, is not something that's easily had at every airport. If we're going to do a centralized model, right, where there's hydrogen somewhere nearby an airport, how close is it going to be to the airport? How much supply is going to be available? Is it going to be expensive? We know that the cost of sustainable aviation fuels is going to be higher than the cost of Jet A. We know that the power to liquid fuels are going to be even more expensive. We know that there's, at least right now, a hydrogen production tax credit. We don't know, how that debt ceiling dilemma gets resolved, right? So there's a lot of uncertainty there. So with the energy density, we think the high temp PEM and the engine, the sort of string and the motors in sequence in series solves that problem. We are working on liquid hydrogen storage. We're doing a lot of it in-house, and we're also working with some partners on that. We have a very, I will say that ZeroAvia has a very intense culture of wanting to control as much of the IP as possible on the aircraft. So it's interesting because Universal Hydrogen, they have a really cool hydrogen storage model, which is these small tanks, and they'll have them in racks. And so you'll swap, you'll land your aircraft, you'll swap a rack for a new rack, and you're good to go. That's a pretty cool idea, I think, actually. And so it's sort of like Nespresso or Keurig, where you could you could give the machine away, or a printer, right? You can give the printer away, knowing that the customer is going to be spending, 20x the printer cost on ink for the next few years, right? So it's pretty cool, but they don't own, they bought the motors off the shelf, the fuel cells are off the shelf. Really good suppliers, Magniex makes awesome electric motors, Plug Power makes great fuel cells. And then they use a company, Aerotech, to do the integration, also a good company. But I don't know if it's better or worse, but there's an intense IP culture inside ZeroAvia. So I say that because we're trying to do as much of the hydrogen storage on in-house as possible as well. The regulatory environment, that's my job. I've been working really hard on it. We're getting good results. We don't have to explain how it all works anymore. When we say hydrogen aviation, people in DC seem to know, or the decision makers, policymakers seem to know what we're talking about. There's some issues about whether those hydrogen production tax credits are going to stay in place. If there's it seems almost impossible to imagine we're going to get operator incentives anytime in the near future, right? And then we have a modular hydrogen airport refueling ecosystem that we're calling hair. It's fits in the size of a shipping container. So you have an electrolyzer, compression, and some storage. The first iteration of our aircraft, the Dornier, the 600 kilowatt motor, is using gaseous hydrogen, and it uses very little. So it's like 60 kilograms per flight for a 250 nautical mile flight. So storage, production is not going to be that demanding in our next few years, right? But then we get to the point of needing liquid hydrogen, needing more of it, and I think that's where the working group comes in. To be honest, I think that's why I'm excited to join the group and see what we can do to sort of amp up hydrogen production in Alaska. And that is really my last slide. I'll circulate the deck. So if anyone wants to reach out and talk more about this, or please feel free to do so. Right.
Thank you, Todd.
Yep, sure.
Really appreciate that. I think my first question is along the lines of what Jason Moncrief was also trying to clarify in the chat, was the amount of hydrogen that you need, or that you project that you may need as you scale up your operations. Can you offer any numbers there to help us out?
So the caravans will use about, as I said, 60 kilograms per 250 nautical mile flight. That's what typical mission. We're looking, so that, that adds up to less than a ton a day that we're going to need pretty clearly for a couple of years. When we start getting to the larger aircraft, I think we're looking at, depending on the volume at the airport, but I think we're closer to like 2 or 3 tons a day.
Okay.
Per airport.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know how your projected usage compares with some of the other companies that are playing in this space?
I don't. Well, the thing about the Universal Hydrogen's model is because they're supplying because they have this canister model, their hydrogen can come from anywhere. It doesn't need to be near the airport. I think their idea is to truck it in, but then you're talking about a lot of truck trips in and out of an airport, which is okay, I think, at a smaller airport where there's not a lot of traffic, but it becomes problematic later on. At a if you were doing it at Anchorage, I think it would be a little bit tedious.
Other questions from folks? Tim, I see you've got a question. Do you want to go just ask it in person?
Sure, Todd, thank you so much, as always.
Sure.
Going back to your production and your hair system there, could you give us kind of some round numbers there in terms of what production capacity that has, as well as what storage capacity that has within the confines?
Yeah, we can produce and store a few hundred kilos a day in that. So each module is probably good for like 300 or 400 kilos. So probably about 5 or 6 flights to be safe. And then, they're containerized, so we can drop another module on, but at some of the remote airports, right? I mean, if you're seeing 1 or 2 flights a day, that, one of those units should do the trick, right? And in most cases, you're not seeing that many.
Thank you.
Sure.
Nathan, I can see you've got a question on the tip of your tongue. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I'll let it out. So I guess you're looking at hydrogen supply, because obviously that's going to be very important for your business model. And, in terms of distributed, instead of actually producing on site, have you looked into sort of the economics of, let's say, some of these large sort of clean ammonia projects, what it would take to, say, bring ammonia and crack that to hydrogen, as opposed to, let's say, you're not in a great renewable place or something like that, and you can't make your own?
Yeah, we haven't looked specifically at ammonia, but we are looking at all things, right? So if a producer came and said, we can crack ammonia, we can keep it green, and we can get it within a certain price range of hydrogen, I think we would say, yeah. I think initially, I mean, our sort of infrastructure model is we have an infrastructure team only because we can't sell these powertrains without infrastructure at an airport. My hope, and the hope of everyone but the infrastructure team, is that as this hydrogen economy matures, we won't need to be the infrastructure people, right? In one of the hubs, I can say that Airbus has pitched, one of the DOE hydrogen hubs. One of the projects that was pitched is an Airbus project to hydrogen enable an airport. Even though they don't plan to fly Airbus aircraft until 2035 at the earliest, they want to get in on it now and do the ground support equipment and sort of work out the kinks of hydrogen production and use on airport, and sort of capture the market before their aircraft get there. And then Rolls-Royce is doing the same thing in a different hub. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think it would be naive of us to think that we're going to emerge somehow as the infrastructure player.
Mm-hmm. So I guess in that case is, because I know you mentioned green hydrogen, but, is that sort of like a requirement, or has there been some thought of maybe we should use conventional or maybe something in between hydrogen?
So in the lower 48, we would say there's no reason to do anything but green, because the production tax credits will make it cost competitive with gray. In a place where it's hard to get renewables, I think that position has to change. But that is one reason we supported the renewable power standard, because the more renewable power Alaska gets into the grid, then the easier it'll be for us to sort of keep that claim going that we're zero emission.
Yeah, no, I think Alaska could be like a case where that really works out, because, we have the coastal potential for renewables, and it's difficult we don't make aviation fuels anymore, I believe. So definitely a strong case for that.
Yeah, I love the sort of tidal, renewable thing that's going on. And there's a company operating called Raven SR that does solid waste to multiple different fuels, hydrogen being one of them. But I think they could do it with timber waste also, or forest waste. So yeah, I think that whole angle of hydrogen production is going to be really cool.
Great. More questions. I see Doug's popped up, and we all know he is an avid aviation fan. So Doug, what's on your mind?
A couple things. Thanks, Todd, for the great presentation.
Sure.
I'm Doug Johnson with Ocean Renewable Power Company, and we are a group that's going to be providing tidal low carbon energy.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so we're keen on this and have met with some of your colleagues previously and their visits to Alaska. So one of the things that I'm wondering is, as you look at this, how do you see ZeroAvia coming to Alaska? Are you going to come here and test first, or are you going to come here, kind of commercially in a big way? What's your sort of rollout strategy in Alaska?
Right. So we already have a deal with Raven. but they're flying the larger aircraft, so they're not looking at us at least for another few years. So we're looking at FedEx. We're looking at there's a number of air operators who are flying Caravans. So the thing, so for example, Right Air has routes, and the thing to do would be to and because they're using Fairbanks, which is on the rail belt, we think we can get renewable hydrogen there and at least do some of their short routes, right? So we could pitch them on a short route and had the hydrogen hub, the DOE application come to fruition. I think we would have pitched something like that, where we sort of give them, we incentivize them, or do the cost share to get them to fly a route. And then down in the southeast, Alaska Seaplanes is flying routes that are wicked short. So you really only need to have hydrogen at Juneau, which I think should be doable as well.
Well, Anchorage to Cordova would be a nice test too.
Yeah, I think Anchorage would be great. And I know we were, I think when we were talking about the hub, we had talked about maybe there was going to be hydrogen at the port.
Yes.
And that it wouldn't be a big stretch to take a little bit of it off. As I said, our first couple of years, we're not going to need very much at all.
Yeah.
So.
And what do you see your first couple of years in Alaska actually using fuel? What do you see that time frame being, Todd?
Oh, well, if we start producing and flying in 25, it depends on how adventurous a company like Alaska Seaplanes or FedEx wants to get. I actually was in the business meeting with the FedEx folks a couple weeks ago. They were really not interested in being a guinea pig. Apparently very conservative, but there's some good economics for them. I would guess we would be a year or two behind, maybe.
So
20, so let's say 26, 27 would be, and it'd be baby steps, right? Like a demo route for a couple of operators, right? Maybe so 1 or 2 routes.
Yeah. Well, Tim, maybe we can work with these folks at ZeroAvia to get them up for the aviation trade show next year, just to show people what's going on.
That would be.
I think that is already on our agenda. Yeah.
That'd be great.
That would be great. And Todd, thinking about your visit, as Doug was just saying, do you know if you are planning to attend the Sustainable Energy Conference here? Later on?
We have so there's a panel on decarbonizing aviation, and so we are sending one of our guys from Europe to speak at that, and it's unclear whether they're going to let me go as well, because it turned out to be expensive. So I'm fighting for it, but see.
If only we had cheaper airline travel, huh?
Well,
also
yeah.
Following up though on what Doug was teasing out a little bit about kind of the Port of Alaska and something in the Anchorage basin. Todd, of course, you've been planning this out through the program, the Launch Alaska deployment track. Do you want to touch briefly on some of those potential stepping stones there with potential for a parallel, maybe a hydrogen production facility in parallel at the port and some other location like Ted Stevens, and then supporting some ground service equipment perhaps as a stepping stone?
Yeah, I think that would be an ideal situation. I don't know if they're not that far apart, and if you had a refueler that was also powered by hydrogen, it would be a pretty easy. It would be easy to imagine a truck carrying hydrogen from the port. A pipeline would be awesome. It's a question of cost, right? And who wants to pay for it. And I think the airport, the ground support equipment would be a great step. Getting the airport comfortable, right, before you take the step of having to refuel aircraft at a gate. I think that's a really smart way to go. And then you get it happening at one place, and then maybe in a different airport we try the our modular setup, maybe at a place like Juneau or Fairbanks. So yeah, my understanding is we can probably get renewable energy from the grid in Fairbanks. Somebody at some point told me we could probably do a PPA there, but I don't know if that's the case or not. Obviously, we could look into it. So, but I mean, really, the benefit for the state comes when we move up north, right, and get to those communities that are hard to reach.
Great. More questions for Todd. Clearly, we've sparked some interest here.
I don't want to take up all your time.
No, this is great. We have really
I know I
appreciate it.
had to go over the 20 minutes. I don't know what it was, but
It happens.
yeah.
Well, thank you, Todd. We
Sure.
really appreciate your time and the information. I wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing your email address in the chat for anyone to follow
Oh,
up
yeah.
with you
Yeah.
with additional questions or items of discussion.
And then I will, I'll send that deck to you guys and let you distribute as you see fit.
Terrific.
Cool.
Thank you so much. Great presentation and great discussion afterwards. So we'll wrap up here. Again, I want to let folks know about our 2 upcoming events. We will be sending more details out about these afterwards. Monday, May 22nd, in-person social hour in the 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. timeframe. This is right before the kickoff to the Sustainable Energy Conference. It'll be in the Atwood building, first floor. Again, thanks to John Espendola and the Governor's Shop for helping us out with that space. We'll have munchies and non-alcoholic drinks. But again, the focus will be on getting together, and we might even have a little hydrogen demo. And then also our next regularly scheduled monthly meeting will be Tuesday, June 6th at this usual 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Alaska time slot. And we will have Evan Gray from Griffith University in Australia talking about some of their microgrid and hydrogen projects there that are up and running and being constructed. So that will be super exciting. And then our plan is to take a break for July and August because Alaskans like to get out and go do other things in the summer. And then we'll come back in September and I'll have lots of stories to share. So Patty, am I forgetting any other announcements before we sign off here?
Nope, that was it. You'll see some follow-up via email, and thanks again to everyone.
Great. Are there any other announcements for the good of the group, or even some bad jokes? All right. Well, thank you all so much for participating. You can have 15 minutes of your hour back. And we look forward to seeing you soon. We hope to see you at the in-person social if you can be in Anchorage on May 22nd. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.